السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. أما بعد. Good evening. Welcome back as we continue our series on living with heartfulness. Last week we left off talking about contemplation. And so for today, inshallah, I want to begin the session by highlighting advice that has been given by scholars of our tradition on how to contemplate. And for that, I'll start with the advice of one of the earliest scholars in our tradition, earliest scholars of spirituality in our tradition, Al-Imam Harith al-Muhasibi, rahimahullah ta'ala. He gives 5 steps for contemplation, engaging in contemplation. He gives 5 practical steps that one can perform in order to actively contemplate. I then hope to move to talk about objects of contemplation. So I wanted to start with how one might do it, and then gradually shift into a focus on, well, what are the different things one might contemplate on, and how to do so with regards to the content of contemplation. So Imam al-Harith al-Muhasibi, he starts off by saying the first step is for an individual to make their body still. Now, as I go through some of the steps, those of you who've ever looked into mindfulness might begin to notice some parallels and say, wait, this sounds very similar. There is a fundamental distinction though, and I hope to articulate that as we go forward. The first thing he says is make your body still, which means it's going to be difficult to really contemplate effectively if you're going for a jog. It's not to say that you cannot contemplate at all when jogging. It's to say that what we're aiming to achieve through contemplation may not be completely possible if the body and the mind are constantly in motion. Number 2, he advises closing one's eyes. Sit still and close your eyes. We're not contemplating right now, so we're going to do it, inshallah. No, we're not going to do it here. You can do it, inshallah, in your own time, but, we're going to go through the steps. And the third, he says, is try to be in a space where there aren't external sounds. So to contemplate with some nasheeds on, right, with some Quran playing or something. No, he says try to ensure that there's no auditory stimuli reaching your ears. And the idea here, if you think about these first 3, is to reduce any sensory input so that your attention is not directed outwards. Because for contemplation, for reflection, which is going to be inward focused, you cannot have what would be, in this case, distractions. Closing your eyes is also to ensure that something doesn't catch your eye. Ensuring that you're in a more silent/quiet place is also so that nothing gets your attention and you start thinking about that sound that you just heard. Now, this is actually really, really essential because one of the goals is to allow the mind to wander freely without directing it too strictly towards anything in particular. In contemplation, you're not attempting to reinforce thought patterns. What you're trying to do is really reach new understandings. To do that, you have to allow your mind in your thoughts to kind of wander freely. Now, as I was thinking about this, some of the most common times where we have new breakthroughs in understanding, we call them epiphanies, right? Aha moments, like, I just realized something. What are some moments? Anyone? Yeah. During prayer, subhanAllah. Yeah. About what the imam's reading. Right, yeah. Sorry, I misunderstood you. I was thinking something else. Yeah. Anyone else? I'm just joking. Yeah. When do you zone out, usually? When you're not thinking about something? Sleeping? When you wake up in the morning. Interesting. Because maybe for you that's the case. I think for a lot of people it's not. I think a lot of us, we wake up in panic. We're late, right? So we wake up and we're like, right? And you're just like shutting off the alarm. It's really fascinating that, we wake up and we're panicked and we start the day full of cortisol and we're just running from the moment our eyes open. For some, mashallah, like maybe they wake up very calmly and take a moment to reflect, and that's beautiful, yeah. Um, Before you sleep, everyone's being really like idealistic. Guys, in the shower. See, like, we all knew in the shower. How come nobody said it? Everyone's like in prayer and before sleep, like in the shower. And another moment is what? When you're driving. Have you noticed that? On like a drive, and you're just kind of like, you're not there on the road, right? That's all autopilot. Not just the car, you too. All right? And you're just thinking about something, and it just makes sense. In the midst of, Aaron Mills Parkway, you have an epiphany. So Allahu Akbar, there you are. Another one is, and I don't wish to say it, but I'm just going to say it. When you're relieving yourself, a moment where people have a lot of breakthroughs. Now, there's actually research about this on shower thoughts. And I was looking into it a little bit just before the session earlier today. Like, why is it that we can almost collectively say, for most of us, we've had quite a few insights, or at least been able to think things through in the shower? It's not. I don't think that's by accident, right? So, research shows that such environments where you feel really relaxed. You feel really relaxed. And showers, understandably, you're very relaxed. Unless you're taking a cold shower. Then you're definitely not having any epiphanies other than I need to get out, right? But otherwise, people have, and so people will stay in the shower for a long period of time because of the calming sensation of being under water, warm water or cool water, just something that calms the body. And there's no pressing task, right? There's no pressing task. Unless, of course, you're rushing to take a shower to go somewhere. Because then again, you probably don't have any major breakthroughs in thought. You're just trying to get it done quickly and get out and go. But if you're just taking a shower to relax, or just there's no urgency, people tend to, due to the flow state, allowing the mind to wander, they found that people are likely to have more insights anytime. They said at nighttime, in the midst of working on something, so as you reach flow state in your work, and probably there's no deadline coming up, you're just really engaged in some task, and you start to realize different things. And one is in the shower. So all of these, if you think about it, are really states in which our minds are allowed to wander. And in wandering, we're able to make connections that we otherwise wouldn't be able to make. Think about discovering a city. The best way to discover it is to wander. Because if you go on set paths, you only learn those set paths. But in wandering, you just kind of like start making connections. Which way did we come from? Oh, there. If we go that way, we'll probably end up back there, so let's do this. And you start building a mental map. Think about how many of you have parents that know the city off the top of their head? Anyone have people like that? I have a relative who always draws the map on their palm. They're like, well, if you go here, I'm like, what are you looking at? Right? But that's how they draw it up. And we don't often form those mental maps because Google Maps, right? Like that's a set path. You're not wandering. You're not using your mind to explore, oh, this road intersects with this. This runs parallel to that. Like, you're not doing that. You're just looking at the map and getting there. And so wandering is a really powerful way to discover new insights. Imam al-Haddad, one of the great scholars of our tradition, he wrote this. He said, the best time for reflection is the one in which there are the least preoccupations or the least worries and the most potential for the heart to be present, such as the depths of the night. I think this is what you're saying here. Because when you wake up early, before work, before anything, nobody's probably texting you, right? Because they're sleeping. But you're awake. There's likely no pressing task. It's 5:45 in the morning. Probably nobody in your house is awake, so there's no noise. The TV's not on. No one's talking. No one's doing the dishes. There's a lot of calm. And so I can understand that, like, that would be an ideal time for someone to sit down, and make their bodies still and close their eyes, and likely there's no sound around them, and they're able to now engage in reflection. So the fourth step, then, he says, is also to not busy your hands. This is really important as well, I think, to start to notice the little fidgeting that we do as reflective of our thoughts. Right? Well, so when someone's really is fidgeting, it's a sign of thoughts that are anxiously running. Right? This is an important thing to think about. Even if you shake your knee, right? You ever, especially when you were younger, probably you did this, and maybe even now, you're shaking your knee because you're anxious. You're thinking about something uncertain in the future, and so it's almost like a way to release that energy. Has anyone read the research of Huberman who says that you actually burn calories and stuff doing that? It's like, subhanAllah. Are we really talking about fidgeting as a weight loss plan here? Like, it's not really the way to go about it, but Allahu Akbar. Macros, they've taken a hold of our lives. And so really, the goal in all of this is to bring presence of heart. And the analogy that I've given, just to kind of simplify this idea, is imagine you had a glass of water, and it has a lid on it, and you're able to shake it. As you shake it, you can't really see what's inside. Because amidst all the swirls, there could be stuff in it, but it's not obvious. It's only when you allow it to sit still and everything kind of settles that you can see clearly. Is it clean? Is it not? The idea is that when the human sits and allows all parts of their being to settle, that they would hopefully be able to gain clarity about what's going on. And so all of these physical measures of stillness are in an attempt to develop inner stillness. And so the fifth step, he says then, is finally to be sincere. You might have to put some and exert some effort sincerely in trying to explore whatever it is that you're trying to better understand. So you'd have to start watching your focus. And we're going to talk more about that, inshallah. But these are 5 steps that he mentions, and I'll quickly recap them for those of you who might have missed it. Number 1, make the body still. Number 2, close your eyes. Number 3, ensure that there is no auditory input. Number 4, do not busy your hands, meaning keep your hands calm. And this is where you start to see postures coming about, where people sit like this and hands here. It's all, again, to very intentionally control the limbs of the body so that you're aware of them. Because sometimes if you just let your hands go without realizing, they start to shake or scratch or pick at something. Right? So by intentionally placing your hands somewhere, you now ensure that they won't go anywhere else. And finally, to really sincerely direct one's heart towards the object of contemplation. Okay. Now we turn to the first object of contemplation that I want to discuss, and that is ourselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about this in the Quran. وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. That in human beings there are signs, and then he says, do you not look? Do you not look at yourselves outwardly but also inwardly with the basara of the ayn, the vision of your eyes, look at yourself, but also with the basira of the heart to reflect on your state. أَوَلَمْ يَتَفَكَّرُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ, Allah says. Do they not reflect and do tafakkur on themselves, in regards to themselves? Now, the goal is not only to better understand yourself, but it's to use that understanding of yourself to recognize God. Because our scholars have always understood that one of the greatest barriers and obstacles between us and the recognition of God is our false ideas about ourselves. And sometimes our obsession with ourselves. And so when I talk about contemplation, I want to make something clear. I'm not referring to navel gazing. How many of you are familiar with the term navel gazing? I don't mean looking at your belly button, I promise. How many of you are familiar with this? No? Okay. Well, navel gazing is really this idea of being so absorbed in thinking about yourself that you, in essence, lose sight, not literally but figuratively, you lose sight of the bigger picture of the world. And it's engaging in self-reflection in a very unhealthy way. And so when people, problematize their problems, they diagnose themselves psychologically. They often engage in navel gazing. The point of reference for everything is themselves. They talk about, well, I'm this and I have this. And yesterday I realized I might actually have this as well. And by, the 8th month, they have every single diagnosis in the DSM-5. Like, they've figured it out. All of them. I have it all because I've thought about it. If you think about it long enough, you'll find something to confirm your bias. You'll find something, some symptom. So one example of navel gazing is to loop your feelings. There's a conversation that you're really uncomfortable about. You go back to it. You replay it. You feel terrible about it. And then your mom calls, so you go. And tomorrow you sit down and do the same thing. And every single day you do the same thing. And in your head, I'm just reflecting over it. No, you're not. You're replaying your pain and perhaps even building up resentment for that person, because every single time you reflect on it, it angers you again. That's not productive. We can sometimes navel gaze by overanalyzing our intentions. Why did I say that? I shouldn't have done that. What does it say about me? Now what are people going to think about me? Rather than go and have a conversation to clarify, I shouldn't have said that. Well, what if I did this? I could have said that. Yeah, maybe that's what they meant then. Or maybe that's why they left afterward. Or maybe go ask them. Maybe go face the tough conversation. And this is where psychology can paralyze you if you don't really understand the goal. And this is where people start to misunderstand what psychology is about. Because they've seen instances of people that will navel gaze. And the person's not interested in making changes. Or they are, but they don't really even think about it. They're so busy analyzing. When we procrastinate and we mask it as reflection. Did you go have that conversation? Remember after Thrive, we heard it, the Shaykh said you should go have a convo. No, I'm still thinking about it. I'm thinking, when should I talk to them? And now we start thinking, well, the best time, last time this. And for many of us, we've realized sometimes we just need to take action. Just go have that convo. Do a little bit of planning, go in with 2-3 things, and you're good to go. We are trying to regain a sense of control that gives us almost in our minds, we're looking for a certainty. We're looking for a certainty about that convo that only exists on the other side of that convo. But what if they respond this way? You'll never know until you sit and have the convo. But we don't take action because we're stuck overanalyzing. And so here we have to then, in order to avoid that, we have to distinguish between rumination and reflection. So reflection would be, okay, this happened. What could I do differently? What can I learn? And where do I go from here? Rumination is why, but why? And you could go on days and weeks with why. Like I have had people come to talk to me who are thinking about why and have been thinking about the why of a situation for months. For months. And sometimes you can find out by asking someone, and sometimes you'll never find out. And so then you end up, what we talked about last week, peace doesn't come from being able to control the circumstance, because you can't always do that. It comes from coming to terms with uncertainty. Learning to accept that the world won't always be as I want it to be. And accepting that. To also ask forward-moving questions, which means ask questions that will actually move you forward in your assessment of yourself. One question could be, and people often ask very broad questions like, why am I always anxious? It's a very broad question. How are you going to dissect that and even make sense of it? A much more granular but practical way to think about it is, okay, what are moments when I feel anxious? And what would be triggers that lead to me feeling that way? What does it even feel like? Right? I noticed this in my life, for example. I remember this one time, not once, repeatedly, I would have this moment where I felt like on a certain day of the week, why do I always feel sick? It's like every single day of the week, on that day, I feel sick. Until I realized, wait, on that day, there's something that takes place that triggers a certain kind of anxiety within me. And I'm like, oh, so I was misinterpreting that anxiety as like a sickness, because you feel kind of cold and, just a little, not as vigorous. You just feel a little off. And I realized, it has nothing to do with the day. It has to do with the event that takes place every single day, every single week on that day. And then I was able to make connections and start to address that. It's not so obvious until you really pause and say, wait, like, this can't be a coincidence. And we have patterns. As humans, we're creatures of pattern and routines, which is a blessing because it's not going to just be random things happening all the time. If you can start to notice patterns, you can start to make better sense of your behavior. Okay, I'm going to share a quote here. And I share these quotes. I'll explain why I share quotes so much, because someone will be like, man, you always share quotes. I think quotes are one of the greatest methods and gateways to reflection and contemplation. So I'm going to quote one. This quote is attributed to Carl Jung, though one would argue that it's more of a paraphrase. To my knowledge, it's not actually from any of his works. He says, but it's a very famous quote of his. He says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So, even last week I shared a quote, and almost every week I'll share one or two quotes from different sources. Why? Because they're really short statements, pithy aphorisms. And what they do, they have a tendency to provoke a line of thinking. Because once you hear that, it provokes some thoughts that relate to you. And if you run with it in a healthy way, it can quickly lead to insights. And so let's think about this one, because I think it's really, it's a really powerful one in terms of reflection. It draws our attention to how the parts of us that we allow to go unexplored, how they show up and manifest in our daily lives. And what do we think? We think, that's just the way it is. That's just how I am. That's just my destiny. Right? Or, well, this just kind of reaffirms for me that Other people need to fix up, right? Everyone else needs to fix for me to be happy. Well, the moment you start thinking that, there's something deeper to think about. So, have you ever had a moment in your life where you realized you were the problem? Well, that's a tough one. That's the moment none of us wants to think about, right? Either you just realized it, and again, this is an example of when, the pain you go through, it's a blessing. Like if you can really understand that. Because if you didn't have pain, you might miss vital messages. Like think about that. It is a blessing that before someone, God forbid, la samahallah, may Allah protect us all. But before someone has a heart attack, they usually feel something. Pain. Because Allah could have created a system where, no, there's no pain. It just, boom, heart attack, probably won't survive. Because what happens usually is someone starts to feel some pain and symptoms, I can't breathe, and this and that. And then they tell people, and then you take them to the ER, right? You take them to emergency. And because of that early pain as a warning sign, you're able to avoid a disaster. Imagine if we began to look at the pain in our lives like this. The pain you begin to experience in relationships, in life. All of these are not punishments, but they are warning signs of maybe greater, deeper issues. Greater, deeper issues. And that's something fascinating, I think, about the way Allah has created the cosmos and even humans, that the pain is local to a certain area, but the source is not localized to the same area, it's somewhere else. Right? You ever heard about someone who has back pain because they have tight ankles? You ever heard of that? That they have tight ankles, like they don't have good ankle mobility. And now because the knee and the hip, it's all aligned and it works as a chain. And when one's weak, the other has to compensate, and then it all ends up on the lower back. So now the person thinks, I just have a lower back problem. And it's like, no, the problem's the ankle. And you never think that unless you're a physiotherapist, right? But you wouldn't think that. You would think there's something wrong here. If the pain's here, the solution must be here. And it's like, no, maybe you're overcompensating over here for something, the weakness over here. It's a blessing. It truly is a blessing. Because if you carry it too long and you don't address the pain, sometimes it ends up far worse. And so maybe you came to the realization that you're the problem because of painful experiences over and over and over again. And you're like, it can't be that the world is just out to get me. Like, it just can't be. The only common denominator in all of this is me. Or maybe someone told you. Maybe someone told you, said, hey, look, I feel bad for you, but like, you're kind of the problem. Maybe not in those words, but, they somehow pointed that out. I still remember a time, may Allah reward this brother. I remember he came to me one time. He pointed out a character flaw. I still remember it vividly. I can remember the whole scene. I was sitting there doing something. He came and sat down. He came privately. He didn't try to publicly embarrass me for the flaw. He just came and said, brother, I want to give you some advice just so that later on in life, you don't repeat this. And, in hindsight, I can remember, like, when he said that, my defenses shot up. Like, how dare you? I'm perfect. Like, what can you offer me? And he says to me, brother, you do this, and it's not good that you do this. And what's crazy is deep down I knew he was right. But like, I'm telling you now, okay? This is now at least 10, 11 years ago. I didn't talk to him for 2 weeks. I'm being real with you. I just started avoiding him. I was so upset because my ego was so triggered. I did not talk to him for 2 weeks. Even though every single day I knew deep down that he was right. I knew he was right. And you know what? That's what made it even worse. Because if he was wrong, I could just call him a hater. But he was not a hater. He was just speaking facts. And I knew it. But I couldn't accept it. And subhanAllah, may Allah bless the brother. 2 weeks later, he comes to me. He said, I noticed you've been avoiding me. I was like, man, do I have to lie about avoiding you too now? Like, what are you trying to do to me, man? Let me suffer alone. And wallah, he came to me. He said, you know what? I really want you to know I wasn't trying to attack you. Like, he was so much more mature about it. And he just said, you know, like, I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I understand you're upset, but like, you know, forgive me if I did anything or said it in the wrong way, but like, I wasn't trying to. And here I am now, 10, 11 years later, just being completely vulnerable with you all here. That, yeah, you know, like, may Allah bless the brother. He gave me really good advice. He highlighted to me that in that situation, yes, I was the problem. In fact, he even risked, if we can start, and like today I'm grateful to that brother. Not just like, oh, nice. I'm like grateful, like, thank you. You spared me so much embarrassment. When you think about it, he, number one, tolerated the discomfort of coming to tell me. When you confront someone with something like this, it's not easy. It's really difficult. And he could have just easily not said it to me, right? It wouldn't have changed his life. He would have just went on with his life. I would have went on with mine. He cared enough that he tolerated his own discomfort, came, risked rupture in the relationship, because prior to that, we were on very good terms, and he shared this advice, right? And in my immaturity, yes, we ruptured that relationship, right? But subhanAllah, now, in hindsight, as you mature, you're grateful to those people. Because they didn't tolerate your immaturity. Even if you overreacted in the moment, the lesson sticks with you. And those are people to be grateful for. May Allah Ta'ala make us such that we are receptive to the truth when it's presented before us. Right? May He save us from acting immaturely like I did. You know what I'm saying? And so the reason why we have to be so grateful for these things is our goal in life, really, when it comes to living with heartfulness, is to live with afiyah, which we might translate as well-being. That's an interesting term. We notice that we talk about well-being and not well-doing. I think a lot of us think about well-being as productivity. What would it mean for you to be well? And a lot of us would immediately resort to productivity. Because that's how we think about ourselves. We define ourselves by what we do. In fact, we don't know how to be without doing sometimes. And if you find yourself itching on holidays, well, that's a sign. I know of someone, they went on a trip. And this was someone who was very used to playing roles wherever they were. So if there was, some function, then they would make sure they had a role. Their role was to be the photographer or I'm in charge of this. And so they were going on this trip with this group and they said, I need a role. But they were not part of the organizers. They were just an attendee of the trip. And so the organizers told them, no, there's nothing for you to do. Just be on the trip and enjoy it. And they kept asking, no, like maybe I can help. Can you give me something to do? And the organizers were like, no, just enjoy the trip. And this was one of the most challenging trips for that person. Really. Because they didn't know what to do with themselves. They were like, I need a way to define myself in light of some role. Like I'm the photographer and I am social media. I am in charge of the bus. Like I need something. Otherwise, I don't know who I am. And I don't know how to be with myself outside of these activities. We want well-being, not necessarily well-doing. Now, the quote that I mentioned about if you leave the unexplored, if you do not make the unconscious conscious, then it will dictate your life and you'll call it fate. I want to give you some examples with regards to ourselves. Because when you reflect on yourself and your own habits, when you find yourself, I want to apologize in advance because this is going to maybe apply in a way that you might not like, but it's real. You keep finding yourself in situations with the same type of emotionally unavailable person over and over again, every time. And you're just like, man, I just have bad luck. Or the quality of the other gender is just so low. I don't know why. You know? It's 2025, man. World's not it. Hmm? But maybe it's a pattern. Maybe you unconsciously interpret intensity or aloofness as love because that's what it looked like for you growing up. Humans will prefer a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. You ever heard that? You will choose what is familiar because it feels safe, even if it's unhealthy. And you'll do it repeatedly. And every time you'll attribute it to the person, not realizing, wait, the lens is mine. And so if I keep seeing the same thing, maybe I need to change the lens, right? You find yourself, every time you have a conflict, you ghost your friends. And then what? You're like, man, I just can't find good friends. Right? Why don't we speak up in conflicts? Why don't we speak up? It's often because we worry about the reaction. We learned growing up that if you speak up, you might get ignored. And I don't want to risk that. So I'd rather just cut them off in advance so they can't do that to me. You can't be hurt if you don't let anyone the chance. You don't give them the chance to hurt you. But then you don't have a chance to even connect and love either. If you're always the therapist friend in every friend group you find yourself in and you feel drained, but you're like, I guess this is just who I am. Maybe not. Maybe this is how you feel valued in any relationship. I feel valued when I'm taking care of others, when I am solving other people's problems. It reminds me that I'm worthy, that I'm valuable to them. And the worry is that if I'm not solving people's problems, they won't care about me. And then I won't have friends. You know, I still remember a guy in grade 5. I know, you're like, what? No, 5. He was really rich. That's how he made friends. He would give away money. I still remember this. It's the same thing. It's my value in every relationship is the money I bring. And so he felt obliged to constantly bring money and share it to keep his friends. But it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The only reason why those people would ever then hang out with him is because he had money and he was giving it away. Do you get that? It's the same thing here. We offer to the world that which we think makes us valuable. If they don't need it, we don't know how to then connect. And we don't feel valued. So then we go, oh, they must not like me. No, maybe they just don't want what you have to offer. Maybe they actually really do like you as a person. But you're not even sure who you as a person is. You're not sure. And so there's a need for us to now begin to explore this inner world through reflection and contemplation. What does that look like? Imam al-Ghazali makes it really amazing, like he explains it really beautifully. He says, contemplation from the Islamic lens, it's a matter of taking two pieces of data, bringing them together in order to motivate and to give life to a third. And so he gives an example. He says, look, imagine there's somebody that really loves this temporary life, and in fact, they give preference to this life over the hereafter. And they attend a halaqah, and the shaykh is explaining that we should all be prioritizing the hereafter. So now this person's like, what do you mean? Why would I want to do that? I don't even know if it's real. I love the dunya. I know it's real. And so now they're trying to figure out who's right. The shaykh, he seemed like he knew what he's talking about. Maybe he's right, but like, I'm not convinced. So then you have to pause and say, wait, how would I figure this out? He says, the first thing that the individual has to concede is that which is permanent is preferable and superior to that which is temporary. That's the first point of data. Can you concede that? That for something if something is permanent, right, like something good, something beneficial to you, if it's permanent, it should hold more value than that which is temporary. And I think intuitively we all know that. When we look at something that we really like and we're trying to buy, we look at the longevity of it. How long will it last me? Will it last a few years, a few summers, a few winters? Will it just be a one and done, like I use it once and then it's done, it won't work anymore? So we look at longevity because it gives more value. The first point he says, first premise, that which is permanent is preferable and superior to that which is temporary. The second, you have to accept and believe that the hereafter is permanent. Once you combine those two pieces of data, you understand then that the hereafter, which is permanent, is superior to this world, which is temporary. And that's a very logical, like, kind of deduction there. But the point is, you take two known facts, bring them together to derive a third. And so, how does that apply to me and you? The first thing is you begin by noticing your behaviors and tendencies. That always is the first step. Can you start to notice what you do? And that's why, again, it is such a blessing. If you have people around you that will mirror back to you in a critical way, like critical meaning that they highlight it for you, they mirror back to you your behaviors and your patterns. I know some of us may feel like the person that just constantly validates us no matter what we say or do, that's a true friend. But anyone who grows in spiritual maturity knows that's not the case. You don't want a yes person around you. You start to really value people that will be honest with you when you need that. And now they do it in the right way. They're not savage about it, right? They're not brutal, cutthroat, and just like, they do it with tact. We start to really value those people. Because sometimes we miss obvious things about ourselves because we've been doing it so often that it's second nature that we never even think about it. Until someone says, do you notice you do that? Any of you ever had that happen to you where someone said, do you notice you say that or you do that? Show of hands. How did you feel when someone did that? You start to feel very self-conscious, right? You're like, oh, do you notice you say a lot? And it becomes hard to talk because you're trying to avoid And every time you say you kind of feel embarrassed, like, oh, just kind of confirmed what they said, right? Do you notice you say right a lot? Like, yeah, I noticed, right? I did again. So we're creatures of habit and patterns and routines. And so we develop patterns. The thing about developing patterns is we develop them so that we don't have to exert so much cognitive work. So the first time when you learned how to drive, it's exhausting. Anyone remember? You drove for 10 minutes. You came home and you were like, I need a nap. You're just done. Because you really applied your mind. You were like paying attention to everything. Every car, every pedestrian, speed. You're like, how do people do this? Every day for 1 hour? But then you do it enough times, and it's so easy. To the point that you don't even remember driving. Some of you right now do not remember your drive to ISNA. You do not remember it. Like, what happened in between? No idea. Maybe you remember leaving your house, and maybe you remember walking in. In between, just erase it. It's like, might as well never happened. SubhanAllah. Because that's routine. So we develop Routines to make life easier. Because imagine every time you had to drive, you experienced a similar state to when you were learning to drive. You'd get to Isna and say, no halaqa, I'm done, right? I gotta go take a nap in the back room over there just to recover for my drive back home because it's exhausting. And so humans learn to kind of expedite the process. I won't dedicate any cognitive capacity to these tasks. Now they're on autopilot. The issue is, on autopilot, we can often miss very important details of our own behavior. And until someone points it out, you don't realize. And that the Prophet ﷺ told us, Al-mu'minu mir'atul mu'min. The believer is a mirror to their fellow believer. A mirror does not lie to you. A mirror doesn't lie to you to make you feel better about your insecurity. It doesn't do that. If you don't like something about your appearance, the mirror is not going to change that. It will mirror right back to you how you are. It's not insulting you. Right? Nobody looks at the mirror and goes, how could you? Really? Like that's what you're going to show me? It's like that's what you are. That's all that is. And so the first thing is to start noticing. And then, so that's your first piece of data, is you start to notice, this is what I do, this is my tendency, this is how I react, this is when I get angry. Because people will come and say, Shaykh, I get really angry, and I don't know what to do about it. So they've noticed the anger. And one of the most common mistakes I see people make is they go from observation to solution. I get angry, I need to stop getting angry. That's an oversimplification. There's so much in between that you've missed. Why do you get angry? And we ask with curiosity, not with shame. Right? Not with shame that like, what's wrong with you? No, like curious, like why? Allah gave you anger for a reason. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created ghadab, anger, for a reason. He gave human beings anger for a reason. It's not a flaw. But unrestrained, uncontrolled expression of anger, yes, that is the flaw. That is what the Prophet ﷺ meant when he said, La taghdab. It's do not allow your anger to dictate your behavior. Rather, controlling and, really channeling your anger in a healthy way can actually help you bring about justice in the world. Because that's why we have anger. It is to protect ourselves and to stand up for justice when we see injustices. And so you start to ask yourself questions, not just what do I do and what do I need to do, but wait, why do I do what I do right now? And this is where psychoeducation is so important. This is why I talk about this so often. Right? Sometimes you show up for Thrive and you feel like you've shown up for what? A Psych 101 course. You're like, we're just here to learn the basics. No, because we're human. And these are all essential skills to understanding your own self and your behavior. And without this, you're just going to be like, I do this and I need to do this. I don't know what the path in between is. Now, that's just obvious patterns of behavior. Even deeper, and this is profound. Like if you can do this level, which most people can't do without a therapist. But if you can start to engage in reflection on your perceptual patterns, not just behavior patterns, perceptual patterns. Because we develop patterns there too. And those patterns are informed by our upbringing, by our core beliefs about the world, by many different things. But because they're much deeper, we tend to miss them. For example, you see someone in the masjid, you say, Assalamu alaikum, and they don't say salam back. One person has that happen to them and goes, oh, they must have been busy. Oh, they were a little elderly, so maybe they didn't hear me. Another person has the same experience and says, what? Astaghfirullah, this person probably doesn't like me. It's two similar experiences. but two different perceptions of the experience. The world is what the world is. What you have control over is your perception. And the challenge is if you don't notice your perception, then you conflate between the world and your perception. And so the world is just so obviously how you perceive it from your lens. And you cannot understand how no one else sees it that way. So the person says, this person didn't say salam back to me. They don't like me. And the other person says, maybe they didn't hear me. No way. Like the person who feels like they don't like me is convinced. No, I'm telling you, they don't like me. No, but have you considered maybe they just didn't hear you? You're not hearing me. I'm telling you they don't like me. Like there's no gap here between the behavior of the person and my perception. The two are one and the same. And that's where creating that gap, that there is the world and there's your perception of it. And sometimes there's a misalignment. And that misalignment can be the source of so much healing if you can understand it. Right? I have seen people misunderstand other people's behavior. Because people don't always express what they mean. People don't always express what they mean. Someone gets really upset. We think what? They hate me. It's like, no, they care. What? No. They love something about you or the situation that they care about. And now, seeing that aspect that they're so in love with and so invested in jeopardized, it upsets them. It's actually worrisome when the person no longer cares, doesn't say anything, doesn't become upset. Because now it means they're not invested at all. But it's to see past the pain, the anger, that there's someone there that's just trying to get through to you. This is why we raise our voices. We don't raise our voices because the person can't hear me. No, they hear my words perfectly, but I feel like you don't get what I'm trying to say to you. So in my head, the way to solve that is to speak louder and repeat myself. But that's not always the ideal way to go about it. I'll give you another example. If someone gives a khutbah about gossiping, and you're sitting there, you're like, yo, Shaykh's talking about me, man. I swear he's talking about me. I don't know who told him, but like, this is wrong. He shouldn't expose me. No, I'm serious. I've had people come and accuse me. Wallahi al-azim. That's where this example comes from trauma. No, I'm joking. I gave a khutbah about gossiping, and someone went and complained that Shaykh was talking about me. You just exposed yourself. I don't even know who you are. But that's a perception, right? I gave a general khutbah. I didn't take names or anything, but someone saw it as he's talking about me. That was the perception. They took things personally. Another perceptual pattern is to expect the worst. Someone texts, hey, we need to talk. And you're like, oh no, I'm going to lose my job. I was talking to someone recently, right? And their boss, and that's why we probably shouldn't send messages like, we need to talk, right? Just tell them about what. But they said, we need to meet tomorrow at 4:15, and and they're like, okay, fine. And the whole day they were stressing. And afterwards they told me, they said, Sheikh, I knew I've been doing well. Like, I knew I was doing well. Like, they'd given me positive feedback and all that. But when I showed up at 4:15, and they told me, yeah, we just want to show you the new project we're going to work on. They're like, but Sheikh, I don't know why. My first reaction was to go, they're going to fire me. A tendency to perceive every ambiguous situation as the worst possible outcome. It's a perceptual pattern, because this person probably does this not only there, but in different aspects of their life. A perceptual pattern. is seeing what you want to see. So, and this is another word for, or another name for confirmation bias. You're constantly looking for that which confirms what you suspect. So, for example, I'm never good enough. I'm never religious enough. I'll never be a good Muslim. Why? Because all you can remember is every missed prayer and every time you were backbiting about someone and every time you did this wrong. You ignore all the good you do, the kindness, the charity, the fasting, all of that you ignore. But this is what you notice. Do you notice you do this in every aspect? While it's not absolutely true, but there is a grain of truth to the idea that how you do one thing is how you do all things. Why? Because of perceptual patterns. Um, there's so many more. I mean, I'm not going to go through the whole list of them. I'll give you one more. Attribution error. So this is where we have a habit of assuming the worst in others and making excuses for ourselves, right? So someone misses Fajr and we're like, astaghfirullah, what a terrible, careless Muslim. And then we miss Fajr and we're like, well, I slept through the alarm. I had the alarm set, it's not my fault. Never thinking that maybe they also had an alarm set. So maybe I offer them that benefit of the doubt. One of the more jarring ones I think we need to talk about actually is if you're really, really harsh and critical of others, it's highly likely that you're very harsh and critical of yourself. Really think about this. And it's fascinating because people don't like to do that with others. So they're like, I feel so bad, I'm so critical towards others, and I don't know what to do about it. I don't want to be that way. Well, you're probably like that with yourself. You're probably so harsh on yourself. You probably tear yourself down. So you don't know how to make excuses for others because you never learn how to make excuses for yourself. It's the one lens that you not only direct at yourself, but you direct at the world. And then from that same lens, you're going to see the same perspective. It's a perceptual pattern. Yeah. All right. Jazakallah khair for sharing that. And so, Imam al-Ghazali, he says, if you don't know yourself, how could you know anything else, really, when yourself is the closest thing to you? And it is the means by which you then come to know everything else. Which is, an example of this is your glasses, right? Like glasses or the lens. If the world looks green, it may not be because it's green. It may be because the lenses are green. And so sometimes we look at the world a certain way, and we're convinced the world is that way, not realizing that, wait, it's all going to look that way because my lens is designed to show me that. And the question becomes, what shaped your lens? What shaped the lens through which you look at life? A lot of times it was your upbringing, the culture, the society, the familial norms. Because the lens is formed to a large extent in childhood. And in childhood, you're not a critical thinker. You just absorb. Because you don't have critical thinking ability. So you just uncritically accept all the ideas about yourself, about others, about the world from those around you. And subhanAllah, it's often when you come into contact with people that will challenge you to kind of shine a light on your perspectives and go, that's not the only way to think about it. And you're shocked. People travel to other parts of the world and they learn so much. Because you think that the only way to live is the way that we live in Canada, in the West. And then you travel to the East and people in the East have no interest in living like us. When you try to tell them, yeah, well, maybe you should work a 9 to 5. And they look at you like, why would I want to do that? And we've never asked ourselves, why would I want to do that? It just seems so obvious that that's what you would do. And we look at them like, y'all are just lazy or something. You don't want to work that hard. And they look at us like y'all are just extreme workaholics. And you start to realize, okay, I can't take for granted my own perspective here. I really do need to consider others, right? So Imam Ghazali says you need to learn about yourself. You need to understand yourself. Um, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, inshallah, as we go forward. I want to talk a little bit more about the cosmos and the universe around us as an object of reflection. And we'll speak about that next week, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us tawfiq to really realize the value of contemplation and reflection, to actively engage in it in a beneficial and productive way such that it transforms us and our experiences with the world and ultimately our relationship with Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullahu khairan to all of you for coming out. Always an honor and pleasure sharing these thoughts and reflections with you and hearing from you as well. We will see you next week, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.